Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Keep Up with Pryme. I'm Laura from marketing, and joining me is our product manager as co-host. And we will be taking a close look at the newest features across our applications that have to do with nonprofits or charities. As usual, please use the chat or the Q&A in case you have questions during the presentation, and we will have a look at those before we finalize the webinar. And now, over to you, Aske. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Laura. So today I'll be presenting a number of new features that we have released in the last quarter, and also we will be looking at a roadmap for the future. Looking at the new features, I have divided this up to 4 areas: setup, plan, work, and invoicing. And let's start with the first area, setup. In the area of project creation, we have a new feature for dependencies and task templates. Task dependencies is something we've had for some time. It allowed you to create a Gantt chart with an outline of the project, a timeline, and connections between the different tasks that defined in which order they were to be created and performed. Now we can include this in a task template. So when you set up a new project or add projects to a task to an existing project, you can then use those predefined relations or dependencies. What this looks like in practice is that in a project task template, you can define these dependencies. So I have a task template. I have a number of different tasks. These are the tasks I would have on a certain kind of project. And the addition is a number of new fields where I can define, first of all, the duration of each of these tasks. I've set these to 10, 20, etc. days. And I can also set the dependency. What is the predecessor? We cannot do the detailed design until we've done the feasibility. So the feasibility must finish before we can start the detailed design. And I've put in an offset of 5 days, and these are working days. So there's 1 week in between. That's kind of a buffer zone in my project. This means that when I create a project and use this template, these dependencies will be included on this project as well for the task that I have decided to take. So if I say create task from template, I could also use a quick guide to do this and create the project that way and get the task. It'll do the same thing. I now get my project tasks. And here I don't see any difference. The difference is if I view this in a Gantt chart, I can see that there is now a timeline to it. These tasks have a duration, they have dependencies, and they have an offset in between them. So this is predefined. And of course, I can adjust for this specific project. We will use more time for the detailed design, so I can move that out a little bit or vice versa. So this is a new feature, dependencies in task templates. Next up, we have contracts. Contract is something we've had for a long time. It allows you to make a collection of projects that are worked with together as a single contract. And in the past, it could be a bit tricky to add new projects to a contract. We made that easy. So on the contract, there is now a action on the list of contract tasks where you can assign new related projects. You open the list, say, I would also like to include this one. And you say, assign related project. And now this is added to the contract. So a lot easier. Next up, for resources, we've added a lot of new features for creating resources. That can either be copying resources, it could be creating new resources but using a template, and it could also be importing a list of resources. This is both interesting if you have a number of resources coming on, you want them to be create them easily, or it could be for new implementations of new companies where you have a base list of resources that you want to work with. So This works in a number of different ways. One of them is the resource template. So it's found under template setup and resource template. Within here, you can define different templates. I have one for consultants and one for project managers. And it includes the default fields that you would have on a project manager. In this case, that it is a project manager, it's hourly, it's part of the project manager resource group, etc., etc. So all the fields that I would normally fill out the same way for every new project manager. This can be used if I go in and create a new resource. So I'll say new resource, and then I can select this template. So it should pop up as a question if you have multiple resources. I can also use this in the import feature, where I can go in under processing and resources, import resources. This is also a new feature. I can create a list of all the new resources I would like to create, the name, the title, email address, etc. And here I can select a template and say, this one will be a consultant, another one will be a project manager. So I only need to fill in whatever is unique to each of these resources. One of the things here is I can also put in information about time periods and dates, so it will automatically create timesheets. I can set it to copy permissions from other resources, copy prices from another resource. So there's a lot of features in here to make it easy to create those resources. Lastly, we have a copying feature where you can copy existing resources. And so I might have a resource I would like to copy that resource, or maybe even the user itself, because the user can, of course, have permission sets. So if I say copy the user, I can decide I want to copy permissions, settings, setup, etc. And so I might want to create a new user and copy it from an existing user, and the same for the corresponding resource. What resource do I want to use as the basis? What is the new resource? Again, the same title, name, email, copy permissions, prices, dimensions, etc. So making it a lot easier to create new resources. In the planning area, we have the function of project work, where you can create work items. Within that, we have created a new set of categories, or allowed you to create some categories so you can categorize your work. What that allows you to do is, if you have some work items, I have some here, and you can then put a category on them. I have this one, and I could select a category and say, well, this is in the survey category. And that allows you to divide up your different work items. So later in reporting or different views, you can use those categories to filter on in here. In this area of planning, we also have a feature to import budgets via the budget journal. And you can now import that from Excel. In the past, you had to do copy and paste or editing Excel, which this is just a new way that in some ways might be easier to use. So if I have a project and I want to create a budget via a budget journal, I can create a budget journal, give that a name, and then I can go into that budget journal and I can import a budget, import from Excel. In order to get the right format to import, I need to create a template. That template corresponds with the columns that are in the budget journal, of course. So it looks something like this, with a date and a task and a number and description, etc. So I would fill in this template, and then I would use the import from Excel to import that template that populates the list of project ledger entry, budget ledger entries. Within the work area, we have a new reporting feature, and this one is unique to non-profit or fund management. It is the new fund analysis report. So we've had some different ways of reporting, and there is now a new fund analysis report, which will open an Excel sheet so that you can download that. And that allows you to see a Excel view, and it's kind of more of a dashboard view if I open it up here, where you have something with a number of totals. There is a fund health area with a view by fund. There is also a more specific list of commitments by fund, reserved versus total cost allocated, committed versus received, reserved, total allocation by department, and so on and so forth. Even a timeline for those funds that have expiry dates, etc. So trying to make it a little bit easier to get a nice overview of your funding and your commitments. And because it is an Excel report, you can of course make changes to it, save that back into Business Central, and then you will get that next time you run that report. Within the area of time, we now have a time tracker for Windows, and you might actually have noticed that I have it running down here in the corner. This is a small standalone Windows app that can either run on top of other windows, or you just have it sitting around in the corner, and you use it to track your time. We can see here that I'm currently tracking time up, keep up with, and that is misspelled, so I will just fix that, keep up with nonprofit. And I have selected this to be for a certain customer and a certain project and a certain task, etc. So it's an easier way for those that don't want to go into Business Central to track their time. Just do it out here. And of course, it goes into Business Central and becomes part of that timesheet. And it's very easy. When I stop working on this, I'll just pause this and then I will add a new entry. I can even go back and restart old ones. So what does that look like in Business Central? Well, it looks the way it has always done. It is just a new layer on top, so to speak. So if I go into my time tracking calendar, I should be able, or my time tracking entries, I should be able to see these are the exact same entries that I show here. It is just a different view, but a bit smaller, more efficient, nicer to work with. When we get to looking at the roadmap for the future, I will get back to this because there's definitely some future work in this as well. We also have added a feature for geo-tagging. Geo-tagging is for when you have time tracking, maybe it's not if you do it on Windows, but for people on site tracking time on mobile devices, keep track of where they actually were when they tracked their time, what site they were at. Then you can do that. You can enable it, and it will save the coordinates of their location at the time they tracked that time. That can later be exported. You can view it on a map, etc. We have also added daily timesheet totals to the timesheets. It is a small addition, but when you have a timesheet and you look at that and look at the matrix view, we have added totals up here. Currently, it says the total is 0, but if I add, let's say, a certain project or task, it will show up with the total number in here that I have in this column. Next up, within the area of purchases, and this is specifically for AP automation, we now allow you to create vendor bank accounts when you create a vendor based on an incoming invoice. And we also have some new invoice rounding rules where you can have different rules for different vendors so that the rounding that you expect matches with the actual rounding that vendor uses on their invoices so you don't get mismatches. Within the invoicing area, we have a new feature for undoing the closing of invoice lines. This is mostly for work that is recharged directly, so more of consulting work than maybe funded work. But if you have something that is done more on a consulting basis, you had the feature in the past where you can close a line, basically saying this is a write-off. You can now undo this again. So looking at a certain project, if I have some entries in here in my project ledger, I could select that some of these entries I would like to close. And if I close them, they become marked as closed. They cannot be recharged. And this could happen by mistake. I could have selected the wrong line. It was a bit of a hassle to undo. Now you can simply click the undo close invoice lines, and that undoes that, and it is now open again. So simple undo feature can help out a lot. For those using the intercompany functionality, where you can transfer projects and time entries and project ledger entries, etc., between different companies in a multi-company group, we now allow you to transfer binary data. Primarily, that is for document attachment. So you have expenses that you transfer from one legal entity to another. You can now also transfer the attached receipts as a backup and a proof that there was actually a cost there. If we look at our subcontracting functionality, we now have approval workflows, and we allow you to create self-billing invoices. So if you are subcontracting out a lot of work and using the subcontracting functionality, that should help a lot, especially with the approvals. If we look at what it looks like without approvals, if I open up a subcontractor statement where I have collected a number of pieces of work that is done by a subcontractor and I want to pay this out to the subcontractor, currently there is an approve button that basically anybody who has access to this can click and mark this as being approved. If you want to turn this into more of an approval workflow, you have to enable the workflows. There is a few steps to this. First, you have to open up the workflow templates. And within the workflow templates, you might see a workflow for subcontracting at the end here. If you don't, you will need to reset the templates, and that will bring that template in. When that template has been brought in, you can then create a new workflow based on this template. So there's this extra step, and we can now see I have a template for Pryme subcontractor statement approval workflows. Let me create a new workflow. So creating a workflow, new workflow from template. I will select the template that I just got. And now I have an approval workflow. I can, of course, adjust this approval workflow to have special rules that applies to my processes. Who should do the approval is that the project manager it is whoever is responsible for the subcontractor. This is what you will set up in the workflow. But there's a default workflow here. If I now enable this, I will see on my subcontractor statements that the buttons have changed a little bit. There's no longer this approval button for direct approval. Instead, I can send an approval request. This will send this for approval to whoever should be the approver on this kind of document. This concludes our flow of new features, and let's have a look at the future. So this is a roadmap for the future. It is, of course, as always, something to be adjusted. There will be changes, things will be added. Some things might come at an earlier point or a later point in time, so no guarantees. If we look at this more for non-profit, I've slimmed a little bit down. What we have left in Q2 is some features within the purchasing area for better mapping to projects when you have incoming invoices, so it finds the right kind of cost to map to. And we will introduce a new risk management app that will allow you to do risk management. That could be on projects, that could be on vendors, could also be on customers and other areas within Business Central. So there will be a risk register where you can say, I have this vendor or this subcontractor. These are the risks I want to list. What is the expected impact of this risk? What is the likelihood? And that, of course, gives you a score. So you can have different scores. You can set up mitigation rules, set it up for review, and track whether a risk has actually manifested itself and what mitigation steps you've taken. And that gives you a total risk score for the project or the subcontractor or the customer or whoever it is as well. So this will be really interesting to see. It is a new app. It is not released yet, but we hope to release it early this summer. Coming to Q3, within the funds and grants area, we will have a new feature for cost reallocation. This is also an interesting one. The idea being that when you have cost in some area and you want to reallocate that out to different projects, that would usually be overhead cost, there will be a way to set up reallocation rules where you define how are these costs to be reallocated. Is it based on the total cost split of the projects we are reallocating to? Is it based on the time spent by different employees? What is the key? Is it an equal split? Different kinds of splitting, and it will either take cost out of an internal cost project or an overhead project and move it to the actual projects, or it will take that cost out of the general ledger, find those cost accounts, take the amount for a period, and reallocate that out to different projects as overhead. We will also introduce better workflows for the fund management, and we will have a better connection between invoicing and commitments, so you can invoice your commitments and there will be a direct tracking. So whenever that invoice is paid, that commitment is also being marked as being paid. Within time tracking, there will be some better features for tracking the quality of descriptions. Within work planning, we will have the possibility to set rules for skills on pieces of work. So you need a certain skill or a set of skills to be able to perform a piece of work. We will also have what is called work sets. So these are predefined sets of work items that always goes into a certain project. That could be different checklists to be done in order to initiate that project or later on to follow up on that project. Of course, even to perform any work ongoing in that project. Within subcontracting, we will add a holding feature so you can hold entries. Within purchasing, there will be some better PO matching, and we will align with some of the will holding taxes features in PC28. Within reporting, there will be a possibility to update dimensions on project ledger entries. So for correction, that will make it a lot easier. This is similar to the function within the general ledger where you can change dimensions on existing entries. And then, of course, we will keep working on the risk management and add some AI features for Copilot to help you identify risks automatically. Moving even further out into the future, looking at the end of year, beginning of next year, we will look at capacity planning for work and the standalone tracker that I showed a little bit earlier for time tracking. We will introduce that for mobile platforms and non-Windows platforms. Practically, that means Apple platforms, some MacBooks, etc. But for the mobile, it will be really interesting, especially for outside people working on site that can very easily track their work as they come and go.